when looking for more information on especially the Exalted March DLC, apparently like everything is rumors except for that Twitter barrage that was it Mike Laidlaw? Yeah, Mike Laidlaw put out, where that one had some like hard facts of like what it was going to be. So I was just going to focus on that rather than the rumors.
Yeah, for sure. My namesake. Am I like on page 20 if you Google Exalted March?
Yeah.
Am I on there somewhere?
Probably. It was really hard to like not just find, the game's Exalted Marches, like details on that. Like, no, I want the cut content that's really obscure. That's what I want.
Yeah, for sure. So welcome to Split the Veil podcast, where we talk about Dragon Age, Mass Effect, Bioware related things. I'm Jordan. I have a YouTube channel called The Exalted March.
And I'm Caitie, and I have a YouTube channel called Ghildirthalen.
So today we decided we were going to talk about Dragon Age 2. Last time we kind of did our deep dive on Mass Effect Andromeda, because that's somewhat of a controversial topic, and we kind of gave our thoughts on it, what we thought worked well, what failed about it. And so we thought this is kind of also one of those evergreen topics. We can always talk about it. It's one of those debates that keeps coming back up in the Bioware community. So we thought we would kind of go over our general thoughts of Dragon Age 2. Same thing, what failed, what worked, and maybe some missed opportunities with DLC or other things that they could have done that they didn't do.
Mm-hmm. Well, jumping right into it, what did you think of the game?
Dragon Age 2, and I think I mentioned this last time, it's one of the only Bioware games that I completely stalled on. I did not finish it when I originally started playing it, and I mean, there was a real point where I thought, am I ever even going to go back and bother finishing it? And that never happens with Bioware games. Like, I plow through Bioware games, and a lot of times I start my second playthrough immediately after the first one. So yeah, my initial reaction to it was like, I didn't like it. I felt like it was the worst Bioware game I had ever played, and just wasn't a fan of how limited the city was. Kirkwall felt small to me. The dungeons were so repetitive. All the same reactions, all the same criticisms that you always hear about Dragon Age 2. And then at some point, I just decided, well, I really need to go back and finish it. And I stalled pretty early. I think I stalled before the end of Act 2. And of course, the end of Act 2 with the Kunari and like the showdown with the Arashok and everything, that's like probably the most badass part of the whole game. I think they almost could have ended the game on the end of Act 2. That's how strong it is.
Yeah.
And that just kind of turned my opinion around on it. I really loved the end of Act 2 and Act 3. And then, once I started playing through the Bioware games on PC, because originally I played everything on console, I played it with mods, and I got to kind of tinker around with it. I don't know what happened. Just over time, I guess I started to become more familiar with the Dragon Age franchise storyline. And then I really started to appreciate that Dragon Age 2 is like a whole game about setting up the major fallout in Dragon Age Inquisition. That's super frustrating if it's 2011, whenever the game comes out, and you finish playing the game, and I think like during the third act, you see Alistair or Stroud or somebody like run in, tell you how unimportant this entire game is and how they have something more important to do, and then bomb out real quick, and you go like, well, how come I'm not playing in that game then? That's super frustrating in the moment. But when you play it, like when you marathon all the Dragon Age games, you're like, oh, this is actually kind of cool that they took the time to do this just as setup. So initial reaction, very disappointed like everyone else. In context and in hindsight, I've kind of started to love Dragon Age 2, honestly.
So I played Dragon Age pretty late. Like I played Origins for the first time in, oh God, what year was it? It was like, it was January 1st, 2015. So I coming into the series really late, and I pretty much just shotgunned the series back to back to back. So I didn't even know that Dragon Age 2 was supposed to be a bad game. I just saw Dragon Age and was like, oh, that's the next one, I'll play it. So I came into it thinking it was going to be one thing. I thought the Dragon Age series was going to be all about the Blights. So when that didn't happen, for the most part in Dragon Age 2, I was shocked. It was like, oh God, what's going on? But I didn't, it was definitely different than Origins, but like I didn't hate it. Like I just thought it was like, oh, like this is, some of the things are repetitive, but I just assumed that was a product of the times because it was a really older game. And it wasn't until much later I was like, oh no, this was shit back then. Oh, okay. I just assumed it was something about older games because I'm pretty new to the gaming experience. So I guess that's my unique perspective of like, at the time, I didn't think it was that bad because I was outside of the bubble of drama.
Yeah, no, that's a super interesting perspective, and it's super valuable too, because like being in the bubble, it really distorts things. I almost wonder if I would have, I mean, I enjoyed Andromeda, but I almost wonder if like people who aren't on the subreddit and who aren't on like the Bioware social network would enjoy it more without knowing about the negative stuff. Mm-hmm. And Dragon Age 2 is, it's probably very similar as well. Like that's a great perspective, and also the perspective of like you got to play the games, at your own pace. You weren't necessarily waiting after Dragon Age 2.
Oh, well, now I'm waiting, so...
Yes, welcome to
where are you? I think that especially when I started Andromeda, I was like, oh, this must be what Dragon Age 2 kind of felt like. But I almost think that, and the bad things about Andromeda, for the like, the glitches are definitely an issue, but Andromeda seems to be more of a well put together game than Dragon Age 2. Like, even though I love Dragon Age 2 more than I love Andromeda, just because it's Dragon Age, like, I feel like a lot of the major issues with Dragon Age are, like, worse than Andromeda, if that makes sense. Like, the repetitive areas, a lot of, especially this DLC problem, like, holy shit, like, it is so expensive still. What is up with that? That's insane. I think I paid more for the Dragon Age 2 DLC than I did for any of the other games, because I was able to get them on sale. But anyway, and then, like, it was really short for what it was. Like, how much was it when it came out? Do you know?
Well, how much was the DLC for Dragon Age 2?
I mean, the base game.
Oh, I think it should have been normal $59.99, which you're right, that feels short compared to, the value you got from, like, I mean, you can spend 100 hours in Origins doing everything.
Mm-hmm. And the same thing with Inquisition. Like, doing everything playthrough, it takes me about, like, 100 plus hours to do Origins, and then like 150 hours to do Inquisition, and then it's like 50 hours for Dragon Age 2. Like, that's so much shorter. And if it was like a $60 game, like, I can see why people are really upset with that. Like, that's not great.
For Bioware fans, I think that's definitely true, but I do think, like, I did close to everything on this most recent run of Dragon Age 2. It took me about 60 hours. I was actually pretty impressed that it's that long, but it takes Bioware fans to get 60 hours out of a game and go, it's too short.
That's true. I guess I just don't play a lot of games that aren't like RPGs, so like Skyrim, like, you could spend your whole life on that and like it doesn't whatever. Like Stardew Valley, like that's that doesn't end. So coming into a game that like does have an ending, I just expect like, a lot of time to be able to put into it. And Dragon Age 2 definitely is really tiny. It's so small.
Yeah, compared to other games, though, like right now I got on a weird, like, Assassin's Creed binge recently. Mm-hmm. I mean, those are open world games that have lots of side quests, but you can blast through those. Like, I can get through Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood and Revelations. I mean, you can knock through all of those at 15, 20 hours a pop. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that, like, Bioware fans have this expectation of, like, it's got to be minimum over 50 hours.
Yeah. Do you think that the game has aged well? Do you think it has done better now that there's more time distancing it from the drama, and then also kind of like for my assumption, I thought that a lot of the flaws it had was just because of the time period. Do you think now, like, that's because I see all the time on like Tumblr or Reddit, like, people really love Dragon Age 2 and it's their favorite out of the series, and probably at the time it came out that would have been heresy. So do you think it has aged well?
I do think it's aged well, and it's such a great question about whether or not it's aged well. I'm really glad you phrased it exactly that way, because I've been thinking about this a lot as far as how games age. I just mentioned Assassin's Creed, and like, I'm playing some really old games there technically, because Assassin's Creed started in 2007 and Assassin's Creed 2 was in 2009.
Did it really?
Wow. So like Dragon Age 2, has it aged well? I think it has aged well, and the reason why I think it's aged well, I think games aging well have a lot to do with how many other newer games have done systems that are like those systems, right? So graphically, there's no way you can get around it. The games all age about the same, except for like your occasional Crisis or something like that that's just way ahead of its time. As far as how it plays, to me, Dragon Age 2 aged well because there's really nothing else like Dragon Age 2. Dragon Age Inquisition, I mean, yeah, it's still Dragon Age. You still have a 4-party system, and you can get sort of a tactical cam, and it's a tried and true Dragon Age combat system, but it was like the real, how do I put this? It was like the real break from, I would say the combat system is more similar in Origins and in Dragon Age 2 than it is in Dragon Age Inquisition and Dragon Age 2.
Yeah.
So Dragon Age 2 was kind of like the last game that did that sort of closer to a CRPG party system tactical combat, but they added the fancy animations, so it kind of distinguishes itself from Dragon Age Origins, and then that's it. Like Dragon Age Inquisition has fancy animations somewhat, but it's not quite like Dragon Age 2, and also just the plot structure and the side quests aren't quite the same as in Dragon Age 2. Like Dragon Age 2 back in 2011, that's it. You don't really have another game like Dragon Age 2 to make it look old. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's different enough from Dragon Age Inquisition that it feels like a different thing. It doesn't feel like an old thing. It feels like a different thing because there's no direct analog to Dragon Age 2 that's newer. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. That also reminded me of something that I wanted to bring up, is that you mentioned kind of the graphics for it. And I feel like the art design of Dragon Age Origins was, I mean, again, I didn't play it back in the day, but I felt that the art direction for Dragon Age Origins was really realistic going, like they were trying to lean into the realism. And then in Dragon Age 2, I thought it felt really cartoony. And I think that's actually aged a little bit better than Origins.
That is true. Yeah.
A lot of the characters, specifically even the ones that like aged into Inquisition, they look so much different. And it's not so much that, I mean, there is a graphical change there, but I think it's also because Dragon Age 2 just has a very unique style apart from the other Dragon Age games, and that's something else that makes it stand out. Like the elves like look totally different, and like they even, so Inquisition or Origins had the elves looking just more like short humans, and then in Inquisition they had a little bit of differences, but then in the Dragon Age 2 they had like the big eyes and like their big heads and look like aliens. They look a lot different. So I feel like a lot of the reason it's kind of aged well is because that cartoony graphics, like it's hard to like make that look bad. It's kind of like how Wind Waker. Everyone hated Wind Waker when it came out, but it has aged really well because it's kind of a timeless look. Does that make sense?
No, I agree with that entirely. I've always said that about Wind Waker also. And then, you know, you mentioned the elves, like the Qunari. I mean, although they do definitely have the more distinct look in Inquisition. I mean, if you compare the Qunari between Origins and Dragon Age 2, it's a huge difference stylistically. I know that in Origins, the reason behind not having the horns and everything was more of a time constraint.
Yeah.
And then they had to retcon like a lore reason for why there were no horns. But stylistically, I think you're right. Visually, Dragon Age 2 ages well because it feels so distinct. Not just, I mean, you're right, it's like it's got a slightly more stylized, you could say cartoony look, but it's also just like design decisions on the elves, the Qunari, they look really distinct.
And even the humans too, like there's just something, I don't know how to describe it, but something about the facial structure looks very cartoony, and it's always really bothered me trying to make my Hawke in Inquisition because it just always isn't quite right. I don't know how to make the cartooniness into like the more realistic Dragon Age Inquisition, and I feel like I've heard that complaint a lot of places, and I've always wanted to try to make a video where like say, okay, this is why the facial structure of Dragon Age 2 looks so unique compared to Inquisition, and then trying to marry those two together, but I can't even figure it out. So
well, that's a good idea for a video. Just real quick on that notion of Hawke. You mentioned like the characters that carry over between 2 and Inquisition. I'm kind of split on that because the one that I love way more in Inquisition is Varric. Like when I go back to play yeah, and I know some people don't. Like that's like a real controversial thing between Hawke and Varric. But like I like the more toned down, slightly smaller nose, slightly less prominent chin on Varric, where he seems more like he's a real dashing rogue of a dwarf in Inquisition, man. Like he looks cool, whereas in Dragon Age 2 I kind of feel like the cartooniness is really over the top. And I didn't feel that way at the time. Like when I saw him in Inquisition, I'm like, wow, this is such a cool improvement. Whereas with Hawke, it's the total opposite. I'm like everybody else. I'm like, they ruined Hawke in Inquisition.
Yes. I one thing that So I pretty much play with a custom Hawke, but there was one time I think everyone's first time playing Inquisition, you mess up doing the keep. Like, I think everyone does that. So my first time playing Inquisition, I had to use the basic Hawke. I'm like, oh wow, this guy looks so not like the original Hawke. And I think a lot of that has to do with the base Hawke, specifically the male. I can't say much about the female. Has actually a crooked face. Like, he has he has squinty eyes. Like, one of his eyes is more squinty than the other. And I think you can't reproduce that in Inquisition, and I think that's why that Hawke doesn't feel like the other Hawke. Because one of his eyes is just slightly smaller, and then he has like a kind of a very square jaw, where the Inquisition version has like a longer head.
So. That is interesting. I had never noticed the asymmetry. You're saying that like there's certain features that just don't, which is completely realistic. I think there's only been like one or two character creators in games where you actually have an asymmetry slider.
Yeah.
That's actually really good. So I have to upload this now that you mentioned it. I actually did my video where I tried my best to recreate iconic Hawke in Inquisition, and I think I did pretty good, but you're right in that you have to change it to a different head preset in Inquisition, because the one that they use is longer, and you need a more square Hawke head, I guess.
Yeah, it's Inquisition. Well, really, all the games. There's a couple NPCs that have uneven facial features. In Origins, it's Oghren. He has two, squinty eyes. In Dragon Age 2, it's just Hawke, and then in Inquisition, actually, Alistair has the same feature. But it sucks if you want to like make your basic Hawke. Like, there's actually mods where you can take the classic Hawke head and then edit it. And that's something that I did, and I thought it'd be kind of easy to reproduce in the other game. I'm like, no, because of the squinty features or whatever, like, it just doesn't work out. And it's really frustrating.
I agree, super frustrating. So I think we said we were gonna. I think we said that we were gonna try and answer the question of like overall success, failure, Dragon Age 2, thumbs up. Well, I mean, what do you think? Did it succeed? Did it fail?
I think that kind of also stealing a bit of what I said from last time in Andromeda. This game was made in a year, start to finish.
Right.
And for what they did, that's amazing. Like, I don't know how they did. Like, I know very little about game design because I don't do anything involving game design. But I just to come up with the story and then write it and then do all of the production work and then release it within a year sounds like an insane time frame. And I don't know how they did it. And I think, like, because we were saying, like, it does age a little bit better, especially away from the drama, that I would have expected a game that only took a year of its scale to, like, just get worse. So the fact that it's getting better, I think, really speaks to the writing. And then how much talent was actually there. And granted, it's not a perfect game, but for what they were able to do, I think they did a good job. So I don't like it. Did it fail at the time? It probably like tanked and like didn't bring in a lot of money. That failed, but I think creating a game, I'm more willing to forgive it than Andromeda for some reason. Probably because it's Dragon Age. That's my own bias, but
right. No, I mean, it pains me to say this, but that from a purely like practical, just a realistic standpoint, a business standpoint, I have to say it did fail for the simple reason that Hawke was supposed to be the protagonist for the series. Hawke was going to be Shepard for Dragon Age. And the result of Dragon Age 2 was, no, he's not. We were going to do that. We're not going to do that anymore because EA just wanted to distance themselves as much as possible from Hawke. And really, most of the DA2 cast, I know we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit, but like most other than Varric, everybody else kind of got relegated to like, well, here's a one paragraph explanation of what happened to them. Mm-hmm. So from a practical standpoint of like just evaluating what happened, I guess it is a failure. But personally, I don't feel like it failed. Personally, the way I sort of evaluate any game or any piece of art is what were the artists trying to accomplish? Like what were they actually setting out to do? It sucks based on like what you said that they were given this short turnaround time by EA. EA knew that they wanted to do a trilogy, but they wanted this game that they could get out, I think, before like fiscal year 2011 or 2012 ended or something. So they were like, get this game out in, a year or 18 months or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And then in that time frame, you're right, the creative talent at Bioware was like, okay, what's the best story we can tell in this short time frame, and they chose to center. I think they did the best thing possible with those constraints. They said, let's take this one character, this one city, this rise to power in Kirkwall for Hawke, and considering that it's meant to be a focused story, it's meant to be centered in on this one city, it's not this broad adventure the way Origins was. I think they did about as good a job as you possibly can do with that framework. So personally, I don't feel like it failed, but I just think realistically, when you look at the business of what ended up happening, unfortunately, I kind of have to concede to the fact that like the Dragon Age 2 legacy, if you will, was like dashed.
I totally agree with your points, but I will say that you said it failed because Hawke was supposed to be the protagonist, and then Dragon Age 2 didn't do well at all, and so they had to distance themselves away from Hawke, and I'm okay with that. Like, I like Hawke, but I really like the different protagonists in each game, and I think you actually have a different opinion on that, don't you?
Yeah, I was so attached to Hawke that I really wanted Hawke to be the person going forward, but I don't know. At the same time, like in Elder Scrolls, I would be like, if they brought back, the Dragonborn, or like the Formoran, I would be like, no way. I want a different one every time. So I don't know why in Dragon Age, like I got keyed into Hawke, but I love the Inquisitor too. And then now going forward, now that one hasn't been carried over, I agree. Like the staple of the series should be a new protagonist every time.
Yeah, it's interesting how much work they put in to how lovable Hawke is, because you definitely, at least on the subreddit all the time when people say, like, what's your favorite protagonist, Hawke is almost always the predominant answer, specifically Purple Hawke, because, like, the dialogue for Hawke was really, really good. And then people do like the Warden, and then not as many people like the Inquisitor, at least for me. I think my Inquisitor is my favorite, but that's a whole other story. But, I think this is a good time to segue into the Exalted March DLC that never happened, of what if Hawke was the Inquisitor.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of changes everything. I mean, at one point, like, I made a thread on Reddit of like what would be possible to do if hold on, I'm trying to remember what it was. So I had like a really weird theory that's totally not possible. If when you lose either Hawke or Alistair in the Fade, what would happen if you gave the player the choice to actually have the Inquisitor stay behind instead? And then you end up playing as Hawke for the remainder of the game. Obviously, because of the anchor and the anchor not being transferable, that's not possible.
Yeah.
But I always thought like that would be a really interesting. Like they've never done that before. If you actually switched protagonists mid-game, like what the impact of that would be. I always thought that would be like a really interesting what if, even though it's not possible.
Yeah.
But it's like that's what comes to mind when you say what about Hawke as the Inquisitor? Because trying to imagine Hawke as the Inquisitor, like from the get-go, if they had done that Exalted March DLC, it's hard because now I'm just like I'm so keyed into the Inquisitor being the Inquisitor. But yeah, so the Exalted March, I mean, what was it, right? It was going to be Starkhaven guy. I can't believe Sebastian,
yeah.
Was going to come back to Kirkwall to kind of like raise the city because of the Chantry being destroyed, right?
Something like that. So here, I actually have, if I can copy this paste into a browser instead of a Google spreadsheet. So Mark Laidlaw, a couple of months ago, it was actually this year sometime, he decided to come out and talk about the Exalted March DLC. I don't know what exactly happened in the past, but from the story I've gathered and from old news articles, it sounded like they did announce the Exalted March DLC through kind of like a puzzle they put in a con where a bunch of the devs like wore t-shirts with like Dragon Age place names, but there was letters missing. And if you took all the letters that were missing, it spelled out Exalted March. So people are like, oh, that's going to be the next DA2 DLC. And then it just kind of got scrapped and they never really talked about it. So people assumed that it was scrapped because DA2 didn't sell well. And then one of the things that I'm now looking at the date that Mike Laidlaw said on January 11th of this year, he said that they actually didn't cancel it because DA2 didn't sell well, but actually it was the move to Frostbite, and they chose to kind of focus on Inquisition and make that transition smoothly rather than focusing on Dragon Age 2, which I think actually ended up working really well considering the success of Dragon Age Inquisition. As for the actual DLC of what it was supposed to be, he doesn't really say too much on what the story was. He does say that it was going to start out in the Hanged Man, and it was going to be kind of you. I didn't really say what Hawke was going to exactly do, but apparently you were going to work with Starkhaven and then also the pirates of the Armada, the Felicia Armada. So, and it kind of hints that it was also with the Chantry against another Qunari war. So,
that's right. It was a potential Qunari invasion was part of it, right?
Yeah, he says. One of his tweets says the Chantry becoming very upset with various aspects of the Qunari and started to make moves on the turbulent free marches. So I think it was more going to be kind of almost what we saw at the end of Dragon Age Inquisition with Trespasser, where the Qunari saw the chaos that was going on and decided to like move its way in. So it's interesting that I'm wondering how much. It seems that the Qunari invasion has been a planned point for them for a while, and Trespasser was them trying to get that point back in, and I'm wondering how that's going to play out in the next Dragon Age game.
I wonder as well, because I was right about to say that, where it's like the Qunari invasion is like ever impending. It's like winter is coming in Game of Thrones. Like motherfucking winter has been coming for 8 seasons now. Like the Qunari invasion has been like they've been trying to set it up forever. Mm-hmm. And I was going to say also, they tried to set it up in Mark of the Assassin, the Felicia Day DLC for Dragon Age 2. Like, it was kind of alluded to or hinted at in that DLC, which was the only, like, real major DLC that DA2 got. So that's even more interesting now that I think about the analog between that and they were clearly meaning to have it lead into the Exalted March DLC. Mm-hmm. And now they're doing that again with Trespassers. So you're right. Like I've been waiting for this. I hope it finally pays off in DA4, where we finally get to see some Qunari invasion action.
I would be interested to. I feel like every time I finish, well, at least when I was playing throughout the series, every time I finish the game, I'm like, okay, the next game is going to be about the Blight. Nope. The next game is about, your Hawke, and there's a Qunari invasion, and then you get to the Mages and Templars. And then I think, okay, Inquisition is going to be about the Mages and Templars. It's really not. It's more about Corypheus and whatever. So I'm expecting, like, right now I'm thinking, okay, Dragon Age 4 is going to be about defeating Solus. And I'm totally expecting it's going to be nothing about Solus, and we're going to focus on the Qunari invasion. Like, it's just... It's probably going to... They've been setting up this Qunari stuff for so long. I wonder if even Solus is going to take, like, a back seat to it. Maybe we even work with Solus, because kind of like how we did with Trespasser. Like, we first decide to settle our differences, fuck up the Qunari, and then go, okay, now we can fight. Is that what's going to happen? I don't know.
Yeah, either Solus has to be such an imposing figure, I think, at the start of Dragon Age 4, where he's doing something so major that you have to spend the entire game dealing with whatever he's doing, or the flip side of that is you maybe end up going to the Imperium. You end up going to some other place, or maybe go to Parvalin or somewhere to look for him, and he's kind of in the background. I don't think there's any in between. Either he has to be major and up front, or he has to be like that elusive figure that you're trying to track down for most of the game.
Yeah. It's one thing that you mentioned earlier with the Dragon Age DLC that did came out for 2, the Mark of the Assassin. That might have been my, to put it politely, least favorite Dragon Age experience. I hated it so much. It was so awkward. And every time, like, I don't mind Felicia Day as a person. I want to throw that out there. But something about Talus and then the dialogue, I just cringed the entire time. I did you feel the same way?
It's not the best. So I love how once again we have differing viewpoints on this, because I really enjoyed Mark of the Assassin. However, I hated Felicia Day for a while.
Fair.
No,
okay.
And it's such a weird thing too. Like I have these weird like I'll just decide that I won't like someone for no apparent reason in like a really juvenile way. And I haven't done it recently, but like I remember when Daniel Craig got cast as James Bond, I had never seen Layer Cake, which is a movie where he plays a character that's very Bond-like. I watched a movie where I can't remember the name of this movie. It was a fantastic film. He was wonderful in it, but he ended up playing like a really academic. He was like a professor who was like his marriage was failing, and then he kind of began to discover that he might be gay, and he starts his relationship with this other professor. It was a great movie, but I'm like, that guy can't be James Bond. So I boycotted Bond movies for like. I had to catch up. I had to catch up with the Bond movies, and then I'm like, oh, this guy's one of the best James Bonds ever.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, when Felicia Day was doing her web series or whatever, I just thought it was really overrated. So when I found out that they were going to let her like write and star in a Dragon Age 2 DLC, I'm like, this is nonsense. She's getting too hyped up. I'm never going to play this. And then when I finally played it like this year on my most recent Dragon Age 2 DLC, I felt dumb because I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I kind of like this.
One thing I really hate about Talus, and I think I don't know if this is Felicia Day's fault or whoever wrote it or what. Talus feels like such a self-insert character for Felicia Day.
Yes.
Like it's like, oh, I'm an orphan and I do all these really cool things. Look at me go! Look how cool I am! I'm so mysterious. I'm like, okay, great. I feel like I'm watching her character and not Talus, and that really bothered me and really took me out of the experience.
You're watching. See, this is perfect. Like, you just voiced what I think my view of Mark of the Assassin was before I had played it. Mm-hmm. Which isn't wrong, like, because when you play Mark of the Assassin, you're right. It's like Dragon Age 2 plus Felicia Day. Mm-hmm. We have to, like, put ourselves into that 2010, 2011 time period where, I mean, forgive me, I never really watched it. I don't remember what her web series show was.
I think it was called The Guild.
The Guild, that's right.
Yeah.
And so she was huge at that time. Like, she was one of the major internet stars of the time. And so it was like a real, like, it's Dragon Age 2 plus Felicia Day. So she was like front and center, exactly what you said. It was all about her. And so I guess like at the time, I didn't like that even though I hadn't played it. And now recently coming in to play it, I was so prepared for that. I was like, okay, that's going to be what it is. Just get over it. It's probably going to be silly. Just try to enjoy it. And so I went in with that mindset. And because I was so prepared for it, I took it as like a silly little side story, and in that way I kind of enjoyed it.
I actually, when the Guild was really big, I actually kind of liked it, and like she had a song that came out like, "Do You Want to Date My Avatar?" and I thought it was hilarious.
Yes, it was funny. I saw that. That was funny.
Yeah, so like I actually kind of liked her stuff, and then when I watched, there was also the Dragon Age web series for was it Redemption, starring Felicia Day. Mm-hmm. And that's which I didn't like it, but it had a lot of lore implication. I'm just going to do a quick aside of Redemption now. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. But did you ever watch it?
I only watched the first episode. I'm interested to know what the lore implications were because I didn't watch it. The only reason why I didn't watch it is I thought the production value was so low. Like the Qunari looked really weird. But what
There's also an elf with a beard, which kind of bothered me, but like that's a whole nother issue. So at the very, very end, like the pretty much the entire time, you're like following Felicia Day, and as I'm watching this, I'm like, I don't give a shit, holy shit. But at the very, very, very end, and this is all before Inquisition came out. The kind of the plot of it is that the Cerebos, the main bad Qunari dude, has found the mask of Fen'Harel. And he does a blood sacrifice to open a portal into the Fade to bring in demons. That's the first time, for the most part, that Fen'Harel had been, one, attached to the Fade and opening the Veil, and then also the Rift looked very green. That's the first time the Rift was green. So it really matched the art direction and kind of the implications of what we now know as Fen'Harel and Solus and Inquisition. So it's, at least me looking in, when I watched this web series, it was like Inquisition was out for a long, long time. And I just thought it was interesting. Like, oh, this Inquisition, the plot there is something they had set up back then. This is not new. So,
yeah, that shows how long they had it in mind, and like they were already laying down the Fen'Harel framework. So yeah, I feel bad for saying I didn't like Felicia Day. It's such a stupid, like, that's such a dumb opinion. Like I think of how many times I've done that. Like I did that with Harry Potter for a long time. I didn't read Harry Potter because I thought J.K. Rowling was overrated.
You were trying to be a culture hipster.
In a way, I guess, but I was real, like, between my friends, we had two groups, and, like, you were either Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, and I was, like, hardcore Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
So I was against Harry Potter. Such a dumb opinion.
I think it's a kid thing. Like, when I was a kid, I was really into Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon was my lifeblood. I still have a whole bunch of Sailor Moon shit. And because at the time, and I'm talking like 2001, like really early on, Pokemon was really, really huge. And I hated Pokemon because there was getting more attention than Sailor Moon, and that really bothered me. And like now, like, I played Pokemon, it's all right. I don't know why I had such a hate for Pokemon. And then I when I was really young, I also didn't like Harry Potter for kind of the same reason. And I actually read Harry Potter for the first time in high school and was like, oh, this is really nice and fun. Why did I hate this? And I liked Felicia Day. I like her stuff. I think she's good. But I still really hated Mark of the Assassin. I have the opposite opinion of Felicia Day, but somehow I hate it. And then you hate Felicia Day, or you did, but Formerly. You liked it. Yeah, what gives? Tell me why you like it. I don't understand it.
Everything is reversed in the fade. That our podcast is appropriately named. We've split the veil. We go into the fade, and everything is two polar opposites.
Topsy turvy. Yeah, I don't get. I'm going to say this for the first time, but you're wrong. You're just wrong. It's a terrible DLC.
I mean, you have a great question of like, why did I like it? I guess, I mean, part of the reason why I liked it is because I was determined to like it. It's a totally terrible argument. Like, I was so determined to go against my own illogical, immature dislike of Felicia Day. I think maybe I was trying too hard to like it, but I guess the reasons why I liked it, I just thought because I went into it expecting silliness and really sort of like I really think that in a lot of ways the Citadel DLC for Mass Effect 3, I know it's kind of like a weird aside, but like there's a certain type of Bioware storytelling that mostly ends up in DLC. I think Andromeda is probably the first time it's ended up in a start to finish, like the main game. Is like this sort of like silly TV show style storytelling as opposed to a more sober cinematic movie style storytelling. And the Citadel DLC, the Mark of the Assassin, somewhat even in Trespasser, in the lighter moments in Trespasser, it's more about like, hey, we're having this fun, unrealistic adventure, and there's sometimes humor that doesn't quite land, but it's okay, just roll with it. And I think if you're a fan of that, you're more forgiving of Mark of the Assassin. I think Mark of the Assassin feels like a sort of like a not dumb, but it's like a weird, totally implausible caper kind of a movie. Like they're trying to do like an Ocean's 11-y type of like, we're going to pull off a heist sort of situation. And I enjoyed that because I kind of went in expecting that sort of lack of realism. And so it met the expectation I had for it. Also, I think the soundtrack is kind of fun at times as well. It's very different than the rest of the Dragon Age 2 music. It's kind of got that more upbeat, sort of, we're going to like heist movie sound to the soundtrack. So I enjoyed that. And then I just enjoyed the Qunari, someone who is not a... what is it? I'm forgetting the name of the race. Not the Qunari.
Well, they call them the Kossith, but that's also debated. There's some bullshit's going on with the Kossith word, but go on.
Yeah, just like seeing Felicia Day's character being like, no, I'm a member of the Qun. I'm Qunari, but I'm an elf. I thought that was interesting also.
Which I don't know why I didn't realize she was going to be Qunari, because the fucking symbols on her like chest, like,
yeah.
I felt so stupid after that revelation came out. I was like, why didn't I see this coming? It's on her costume. How did I not know this? It was like one of those moments I had to sit there and take a minute back and go, oh God, I'm so unobservant.
Also, I liked the fact that she could throw knives. Like, that's such a shallow thing to list as a reason, but like I freaked out when she started throwing knives. I was like, holy crap, this is awesome.
Yeah, I think gameplay-wise, like the sneak part of the DLC was like, I think playing it as a game, it was fun. It's the story part, and then specifically Talus I had a problem with. Like the throwing knives. Like there's some sort of mod where I've only used it like once, where you can like use that power, and that was pretty cool. I recommend it. But and like the sneaking
I installed
part,
that mod for sure.
It's a good one. But yeah, I guess also on DLCs, you said that, so there's 3 main DLCs. There's Legacy, which that one I think was the biggest lore implications because of Corypheus and blue blah, blah, blah. But then there's also Sebastian. And as much as I didn't like Mark of the Assassin, Sebastian's just like kind of actually made me angry because it was really just a shoehorn in, like, oh, look, it's a romanceable character. And the romance is like, hey babe, I'm really in it for Andraste, but we can be my chase side bitch. Like, I don't what was the point of it? I didn't like, if you want to have a religious character, fine, that's really cool, like he wants to be chased, whatever, but to really just blatantly say, like, no, I'm more devoted to the church than you, like, why is that even a romance option? Like, why does it matter? Why isn't that like a kind of a Lace Harding situation where you're like, oh, you know, there's something flirting going on, but it's not going to work out. But I don't know. That whole romance and then like his total arc, it just felt really awkward.
He was a pre-order character. I mean, to me, that's what honestly I feel. I want to say that it was one of those things where if you pre-ordered, like, well, you had to pre-order before a cutoff date, and then you got the version of Dragon Age 2 that has the black case. Mm-hmm. The case for the game is like black and silver, and it came with the code for Sebastian, because I don't think I paid for that DLC separately. Mm-hmm. He's like the Shale, basically. He's like, but Shale was so much better. I like
Shale. Yeah, Shale's a good character.
Shale was amazing. He's one of the, or she rather, excuse me, is one of the best characters, I think, that never got anything. She's in one of the books, but she never got brought back into the games. And I'm like, man, bring Shale back.
Now we have to talk about Shale, because I love Shale. I totally would love in Dragon Age 4 as a side quest, we get Shale a human body back. Because, like, do you know how golems are made?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, the lore and the backstory of Shale is amazing. If you bring her during the Paragon of her kind, and this Caradin and Branca, and then if you have Argrin, like, the drama is just, like, so thick. There's all these different conflicting views and strong feelings. Like, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And like, I really hope that, because when you make a golem, you actually take the dwarf body or corpse, maybe, I don't know, and you wrap it in stone and pour lyrium inside. So Shale is still in Shale. Like, there might actually be a way to break it out and get her back. So that would be like a really interesting side quest. And like, oh, look, it's, you know, the first dwarf, you know, from back in the ages. Look how much we can learn, whatever. That'd be really cool. Anyway, we shouldn't talk about Shale because we're talking about Dragon Age 2. I think, again, what you just said, Shale was a really good character in the series because, and the Paragon of her kind, she had another viewpoint of like, no, we need to follow Caradin because of these reasons. And I think almost Sebastian was trying to be that character for the Templar side, because for the most part you had Fenris, but you're like, oh, Fenris, you got some PTSD issues with mages. Don't worry, we'll do the mage thing, you'll be okay, it'll be great. Where Sebastian had more of like the religious view on why you should support the Templars. And I think for the most part he's not a bad character, just like the way they put him in there was just garbage. So
it is an interesting moment when you finally, of course, you know, that pivotal moment when the Chantry gets blown up. It is an interesting to see, you know, his reaction. I know it doesn't match, like, he has this huge over the top reaction that doesn't necessarily he does the Anakin Skywalker Darth Vader and kind of does that whole thing, but it wasn't executed well. But had they been able to do that moment similar to the way that they did Shale and Branca, that moment could have been so much better. I think is why it disappoints people, because that could have been a really great scene if he had forced the showdown right then and there, in a stronger way between him and Anders. Because I think at some point he can just walk off. Like, I'm going to come back and kill everybody. Bye.
Yeah, if Anders survives, he just walks off. I think regardless of your relationship, maybe not regardless. No, it is regardless. I think of your relationship status. If Anders survives, if you don't kill him, he just pieces out.
Yeah.
Which he actually, I don't know if you've been catching up with the Knight Errant comic, but he's actually in there. He just showed up.
Sebastian or Anders?
Sebastian.
Oh, no, I got to catch up with the comics for sure.
All right. I guess no spoilers is that he how do I say this without spoilers? He's you just go to Starkhaven and like you see him, and he's like a pretty chill dude. Like I know everyone like kind of hates him, and kind of the joke with like Varric is that everyone hates Sebastian, but like he's a pretty chill dude. I don't know, like I don't think he's a bad character. I've said this before, but he just the way they put him in to Dragon Age 2 was the worst part. Like they easily could have done a lot of cool things with it, but they just didn't. So.
Yeah, he was shoehorned in, but you're right. I always thought he was a cool character. I think he looks cool. I think his armor is cool, and the premise for him of the prince whose family got slaughtered, and he's trying to sort of, bring this sort of reign of justice back to his land and retake his family's land and stuff. That's a really cool storyline. They just kind of put him on top of everything else in Dragon Age 2, and it didn't fit.
Which apparently, I was reading about more cut content for the game. Kind of apparently what was originally supposed to be the Exalted print? No, fuck, what's it? Whatever Sebastian's DLC is called. You were also supposed to like meet his family and like do a whole bunch of more regarding like his family taking Starkhaven, and then it was supposed to also involve Nathaniel Howe, and apparently there was going to be maybe some like rivalry between them or something like that. So I think that would have been a lot cooler rather than just like my country, revenge my family. All right, now I'm going to hang out with you, and then be really angry when you don't kill Anders. Like having more stake in that would have been interesting as well.
That's interesting.
I also have a list of like other cut content stuff if you want to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. What else did it have?
So I don't know if this would count as cut, or some of this stuff is like they had planned to do something but it didn't work out very well. But instead of Anders, I guess being Anders, it was going to be Volana, who would take justice upon herself. And I think they actually almost tried to set that up in Awakening, because Volana is a lot more angry and, all about, well, it's more about elves than mages, but like you can definitely see that passion and fire that I can definitely see Volana working out pretty well in Anders' place in Dragon Age 2.
I see that, and as soon as you mentioned that, I'm like, whoa, the implications for that are totally different. Mm-hmm. Because you end up losing the juxtaposition between Anders being this really he's mischievous, and he obviously, can kind of get into some bad shit, but he's got a real light persona, like he likes to joke around and he's very irreverent. Mm-hmm. And that juxtaposition with the spirit of justice is really cool. But you're right, if it goes to Volana, she's like super intense, and her whole thing is about vengeance anyway for the elves, and so it would have been interesting, but it would have been kind of totally different in a way.
Which I think is why they actually went with Anders, because I think that while Volana versus Anders would have been a completely different story, I think Anders does have the better one, because you do see that juxtaposition of what Anders was before being possessed and then after being possessed. So in kind of like what possession kind of does to a person, how different he is, and his struggles. And I think that I know I forget who wrote him, but the writer has come out saying that a lot of Anders' struggle with justice is kind of trying to mirror that of people with mental illnesses and how they struggle, and like how, lighthearted, whatever, like sometimes just bad shit happens to your mind, and then you have to struggle with this thing and kind of overcoming it. And definitely when you, at least for me, like I have a psychology background, and I'm like trying to become a therapist right now, and I definitely see the mental illness struggle during the romance. Anders' romance. You can definitely see like this is kind of what it feels like to be in a relationship with someone who's struggling with mental illness. Like sometimes there's good days and they're there, and like the person you fell in love with is right in front of you, and then other days it's like something's missing. He just needs a little bit of help, and it really, I think, gives the impact of the explosion a lot more meaning, because at least for me, when I was doing the romance, because he was the one I romanced first in the game, it was like, oh shit, like I couldn't save him. And I feel like that's a really big factor for people who are in relationships with people with mental illness, that you're like, oh, I really want to try to like help this person, but like, sometimes you kind of can't help the person you're in a relationship with.
That's super interesting. Like everything you just said as I was listening to you and putting it in that framework of mental illness, it really made me think about, have you ever done the rejection?
What do you mean the rejection?
Like where there's the one scene where you can lock into the romance, but you back out of it and you go, no.
Oh my God, yeah, it's so heartbreaking.
That is crazy, and I did that. So it's very interesting what you're saying about the mental illness and being part of the relationship, because as soon as you said it, it made perfect sense to me. Because that specific playthrough where I did that, two things. I felt like it's like somehow I was that character was basically flirting with everybody. I ended up romancing Meryl, I think, or whatever it was. And the reason why I backed out of it, because it's like I noticed there's one scene where I think they make out or something like that before, and I was like, oh, I'm like, that escalated quickly, and I didn't necessarily mean for it to escalate quickly, and then all of a sudden I was getting the scene where I was about to lock in the romance with Anders, so I'm like, oh man, let me back out of this. Understandably, he gets upset, but he gets like really upset. Like he doesn't even want to be your friend anymore after that, which is understandable. But it's just like I went back and I reloaded to try like a couple of different dialogue options that were still rejections, and doesn't matter how you do it. He always gets really upset, and I thought that was really. I think that that's really interesting in the fact that rejection is going to be really hard for him no matter what. He seems to want to try and latch on to that relationship in some sense as a way to kind of like maybe he's trying to stabilize himself.
Yeah.
Through that, and then also like it's interesting what you said. Like if you do romance him, it kind of feels like you can't save him, so to speak, when he ultimately ends up doing what he does with the Chantry. But I think it's interesting that like if you didn't romance him and you reject him, you feel like, oh man, like did I cause that? Obviously you don't. Like he's going to be on that path no matter what. And I kind of think it's one of those instances where the same thing happening in a video game that's about choices sometimes feels frustrating, because you kind of feel like, wow, no matter what my choice was, this thing was going to happen anyway. But sometimes that's interesting in that what ends up happening anyway takes on a different meaning because of your choices, even if your choices didn't cause that thing to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There actually, if you read the codex entries for so each character has like a new codex entry for each act, and if you read Anders, if you don't there's if you romance him, and then if you don't romance him and he end up killing that girl or not killing that girl, do you know what I'm talking about? There's like that one quest where he can accidentally like kill a girl.
Accidentally kill her?
Yeah, well, like if your Hawke doesn't intervene, he will kill a mage girl who was like Sir Ulrich. Oh fuck, what was
it his daughter or
no? Anders doesn't have a daughter, does he?
No, anyway, one of the Templar's daughter. No, that's a different one.
No, it's in the second act, and it's Anders' personal quest, and like you're trying to find like something about like the mage solution with being tranquil, and you go into like the mage underground, and you find Sir Ulrich is about to like It kind of implies that he's going to do like push this girl into doing sexual favors to not be tranquil, and Anders like will you and Anders will kill the Templars, and then afterwards he's so enraged by the Templars he actually is about to kill the girl, and then depending on your vote over your choices by Hawke, you can either stop him or you try to stop him and fail, and he will kill the girl.
That's what it was, because justice comes on so strong at the end, you can't control it.
Yeah. So there's three options of like a romance. Well, I guess a romance with either of those two, and then the other two. But if you romance him, he's actually doing a lot better, and there's more Anders than Justice, and it's kind of describing that like you're actually really helping him kind of go through the whole thing with Justice and like working with it and trying to be more himself. If he's on his own and he didn't kill the girl, things are like, pretty good or whatever, but there's still some bad days. But if he did end up killing the girl, it's getting really bad, and for them it kind of describes like for the most part you're seeing more Justice than Anders, so you can kind of see like the progression of like who's kind of being the predominant personality of Anders versus Justice. So
yeah, and that again changes the meaning or the context, I think, of when he blows up the Chantry, because you can tend to look at that if he is doing better and if you are helping him, you could tend to view him blowing up the Chantry as being a low point from which he then starts to get better and he realizes maybe he is becoming too extreme, depending on your relationship with him. Or if he's not doing as well, you could see that as maybe the beginning of the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. There is, real quick, so I had a video come out of like a lore theory that someone was really kind to send to me, called, like, the video is called Ander Was Used. I don't want to go over necessarily the theory, but I had a really great comment from a dude called Octafluoride, and he mentioned that who did he say? Jennifer Helper, who was Ander's writer, saying that when they were trying to come up with the Exalted March DLC, one of the ideas that they had, they were throwing around, and apparently it didn't pan out, they weren't going to do it, but something that they were thinking about doing was, when you're doing the Exalted March DLC, you would meet Justice. And by that, I mean you meet Kristoff's body with Justice, so then who's possessing Anders?
Oh.
Yeah. Then you would think, like, oh shit, like, what happened? It was Anders tricked? Did something else happen? Like, did Anders lie to us the entire time? Like, what happened here? So that would have been a really interesting plot twist, but I think it would have been, like, too complicated, and, like, it suddenly makes a lot of what Anders said, like, a lie, which is...
it's all questions and no answers. Mm-hmm. Like, that's super interesting, but I hear that and I go, wow, like, that's... all that makes me think of is just like, you're right, it kind of invalidates a lot.
Mm-hmm. So I'm glad they didn't go with it, but at the same time, like, man, that would have been quite the what the fuck moment if you were playing that.
Huge. Yeah.
So as far as other stuff that we wanted to talk about, was there any open ends that Dragon Age 2 had that you think are gonna, I guess, die for the most part? Like, they're not ever going to come back and explain X or Y.
I think really it's just the characters, right? Like, that cast it feels to me like is going to be really, has been and really is going to continue to be underrepresented, at least in the games. I mean, they're probably having some more representation in comics or the books, etc. But just kind of like what happens to everybody afterwards, as far as your party members, I think that's really the main thing. I mean, like you said, maybe Sebastian in the comics, or Varric is obviously still a main part of the games, but I think a lot of other people kind of, Fenris, etc., kind of fall by the wayside.
I'm kind of in the camp that we're not probably, but like we might see Fenris in Dragon Age 4, because like he is almost a face for like the anti-slavery movement, or at least to fans. So like that would be kind of an interesting like throwback. It'd be like, oh hey, remember Fenris? Because like if you read the World of Thetis books, apparently whether he's romanced or not, like his fun thing to do during the off time is just go slave hunting, or slave hunting. I don't know, but and just like trying to free the slaves. So he's already doing the work. I think they've already set that up. And kind of also a meta, if you look at the World of Thetis book, he has a whole different design than anything that we've seen before. Why did they redesign Fenris for no reason? Same thing with Zevran, too, because he has this whole cool outfit in the World of Thetis books that doesn't appear in any other art that we've seen of him. So, like, why did they redesign him? Is he going to see it? Like, was he planned to show up and then he isn't going to? But, like, that's why they have the artwork. Did the artist just want to say, like, fuck it, I want to have Fenris shirtless? Why not? So that's kind of my meta-analysis of, like, maybe we'll see him again. But yeah, I really want to know what happened with Meryl's Mirror, but I don't think we're going to see that again. I don't think we're going to see Fenrir again. I'd be surprised. I love Aveline with all my heart. I'd be surprised if we see her again. I think Sebastian's going to be exiled to the comics. I don't think we're going to see him in the game.
Yeah, I'd love to see just a follow-up with Meryl in general. She's one of my favorite characters in Dragon Age. I think she's super unique, and then she's just kind of like, you're right, the Alluvian and all that stuff would be great, but just her in general, it'd be nice to see a follow-up.
Now we have to talk about Meryl, because I don't know why, and I feel bad saying this, I kind of hate Meryl.
So let's recap. You hate PB, you hate Suvi, and you hate Meryl. So we have.
Well, hold on. I hate PB. No, I actually hate PB. That one's true. Suvi, I'm okay with, but like she does a couple things. I actually think Suvi and Meryl is going to be on the same boat here. Not my favorite character. They're okay. I like them well enough. Like they're not on my shit. PB's on my shit list. PB can go suck it. But Meryl and Suvi, I just don't get them. I don't get like why people like them so much, I guess.
Yeah, PB is like fundamental character persona, like Meryl. Suvi is more like, look, you're a good person, just don't lick rocks and don't summon demons.
Yes. Yes. That I actually never connected the Suvi Meryl thing in my mind, but now that we're talking about it, yes, it's totally the same line of thinking of why they bother me.
I gotcha. It's like, hey, look, you're a smart person, just stop doing dumb stuff.
Yeah, and like this is more going to be more about my mindset, and like I feel like it's kind of selfish to say, but like when her big character moment comes up and Maranthari like takes the demon into herself, and then Meryl blames herself. Like, I get that's what Meryl did and whatever, but, like, why would you blame yourself for something, like, your idiot keeper did? Like, why would you... I don't get why the keeper took the demon to begin with. Why was that a thing? Why, like, I don't understand any motivation behind what was going on. So as I'm playing this, I'm like, everyone's stupid here. I don't... What just happened?
Yeah, I think as I recall it, or as I remember it, at least it was set up in such a way, not necessarily fleshed out, but they just set it up as though her taking the demon was the only way to stop it or contain it somehow, which isn't really consistent with how demons have been dispatched countless times in the past in Dragon Age. But for whatever reason, this demon was going to require her to sacrifice herself. It kind of just felt like that was supposed to be Meryl's moment. Like, Meryl is being reckless the entire time, right? Like, it's obvious that she's just like, yeah, blood magic, it's cool, it'll be fine. Demons, no, not me. Everybody else gets tripped up by demons, not me. And so it's obvious that there needs to be this moment where she realizes how wrong she was. But you're right, the fact that they tied it into Maranthari having to sacrifice herself felt kind of ham-fisted. And then it also takes away some of the punch, because, like, you're right, Meryl's recklessness is something that she should feel bad about. But specifically, the keeper dying isn't really her fault.
Yeah, and it's I don't know, like when she like you go out there and you meet her clan, they're like, you killed Maranthari, and you're like, actually no, she did this to herself, and it, like, yeah, the keeper abandoned her entire clan to try to save the life of her first. Like, I get that, but the entire time it just kind of felt like this is so unnecessary. Like, if you just talked to one another, maybe that's what bothers me. If people just, like, talk to one another for this quest, like, things might have worked out a lot better than they did. We just needed a good therapy session, guys. That's all we needed. That's all we lacked. Oh, Lord. Yeah. Well, I think that this is a good place to end it. So what are your final words on Dragon Age 2?
Final words on Dragon Age 2 are... It's got a special place for me. I enjoy playing it very much. I think every time I've gone back to play it, I enjoy it more than I did previously. But the legacy of it is just something that all the circumstances around it weren't great. And as a result, the reception of it was not great. But I love Hawke. I love Hawke as a character. I wish things had turned out differently, so it could have kept on being Hawke. I hope we see some of Hawke. Maybe at seeing sort of at Weishaupt what's happening with the Grey Wardens in Dragon Age 4, that would be cool. But otherwise, I think we got some great characters out of it. I think Anders is a great character. I think Meryl is a great character if she would just not summon so many demons. And I think Varric is a great character. So overall, even though I think the Legacy DLC is one of the coolest DLCs, and what the implications are for it and how it sets up Inquisition. So overall, there's tons of positive stuff in Dragon Age 2 that does get carried forward. I just think, unfortunately, that short time frame for development, and then the reception wasn't great. But I honestly, it's one of my favorite gaming experiences.
I wouldn't say it's my favorite gaming experience, but I did have a lot of fun with it, and like I really do love the Dragon Age series, so maybe that's my bias there. But I almost feel like Dragon Age 2 and kind of it's almost post-release success. I don't know if that really I don't know if that's the word I should be using, but I feel like it's doing a lot better now than maybe it did back then, because a lot of the drama has calmed down and people are able to see the good side of it. I think that whole message and what's happening right now with Dragon Age 2 is kind of maybe hope, if you really like Andromeda, that give it a couple years and people who like really, really hated it will be like, forget it, whatever. And then people who actually really liked the game are going to come out and be like, no, Ryder was my favorite. I really like Jaw and Peepy and all that stuff. So I think that if you're someone who really, really likes Mass Effect Andromeda and doesn't like all the drama behind it, give it a little bit, look at Dragon Age 2, see how everyone hated it, and now everyone like loves it. Just give it a few minutes, guys. It'll be all right. So I guess that's my final opinion on it.
One day down the road, we might be doing a retrospect on Andromeda where we talk about how it's redeemed itself as time has gone on.
Maybe. I would also like to so far we haven't heard any DLC, so I do you think DLC is going to come out for Andromeda? I don't think so far.
I don't. I think it's because it's starting to set in for everybody. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. My sweet baby Corians are stuck in the Milky Way.
In limbo forever for all time.
Oh, well. Well, all right. Do you want to tell people where they can find you?
They can find me on YouTube under the channel Exalted March. Been a bit of a lull on content, but I'll be back. I'll be coming out with some stuff in the future. And we will also have, I know we talked about it before, some people had asked for the audio-only version of the podcast. That should be up, and we should, if I'm able to get everything uploaded, we should be able to include a link, I'm sure, in the description for this episode.
Yeah, which we should describe. We didn't really know how to give you guys an audio-only format, so what we've decided to do is just put up, I believe, a Google Drive with downloadable links to all of the, is it MP3s?
Yeah, well, probably MP3s will be easier for the file size, so.
Yeah, so like where you can download the MP3s and put it onto whatever podcasting, whatever unit. If there's something that you guys like to see, let us know, because the only real podcast stuff I listen to is through iTunes, and iTunes is really difficult to set up, and I don't know if I'd want to do that. So
yeah,
let us know what you guys want to see, or that kind of stuff. As for where you can find me, I'm at Ghildirthalen on YouTube and Twitter, and then Gillen on Reddit. If you want to PM me there, feel free. And then if there's anything you want to say for Split the Veil, just talk to either one of us or leave a message on whatever video on your channel, my channel, and we'll get to it. All right. So I guess with that, Dara Sharol.